Okay, everybody. So thank you very much for joining this panel on reaching net zero carbon emission in the Japanese energy sector, which is, of course, a huge challenge. So, today we co-host between INSEAD Alumni Japan Association and Energy Tech Meetup, I will introduce very quickly INSEAD to so people who are not familiar with it. So INSEAD is a business school, and the nickname is, or the tagline is Business School for the World. So it's not just pure marketing. Actually, we have campuses in Asia, Singapore, in Middle East, Abu Dhabi, and in Europe, Fontainebleau. And just to illustrate the fact that we are quite international, our student class, for example, for 2021, the current cohort that will graduate this year in July, you have 64 nationalities in this class. And the class is very diverse. It's not one nationality that dominates everything. We have, for example, the biggest cohort is 11% with Chinese nationality. Then we have US, and then, for example, French, just 5%. So it's just for information what what the school is about. And in Japan, so the Alumni Association of Japan, we have 1,000 alumni, and the association is 100% managed by volunteers, for your information. So now, without further ado, I will leave the floor to our fantastic moderator, Amanda. Hi, Amanda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alan. And I'm really excited for this partnership between Energy Tech Meetup and the INSEAD Alumni Association. It's the first alumni association we partnered with, so hopefully many more. Let me share my slides. Can you guys see that well? Let me see if I can get this to work. No, that's wrong. Present. Okay. So I see that some of you are already using the chat, so please feel free to introduce yourselves or ask questions in the Q&A tab as well at any point throughout the event. And also, if you're not on mute already, please do so, unless, of course, you're asking a question, just so we can avoid any technical difficulties. As I said, I'm Amanda from Energy Tech Meetup, and we're basically a local community for anyone interested in innovation related to energy and technology. And we created Energy Tech Meetup, or ETM, basically because we think that energy innovation needs diverse fields of expertise to create stronger innovation ecosystems. Basically, we're trying to get different kinds of people in a room, both in terms of nationalities, but also in terms of expertise and background. And we think that this can help support interesting discussions and this innovation. And that's why we're so excited to partner as well with INSEAD, because as Alan just said, it's a very diverse community as well. And we try to support. Virginie, could you please go on mute?
Yeah, okay. You okay? Yes.
Thank you. Unless you have something to say, that's fine. So yeah, we try to support this in different ways. First of all, of course, we do events and seminars. Pre-corona, we used to do a lot of seminars with different discussions and also networking. And we also really try to engage with the community and understand from a local level what people are interested in and what kind of questions they're trying to answer. And based on our events and our discussions, we also publish insights. So with insights, one of the main things we're doing right now is doing kind of interviews with speakers in a series called ETM Talks that we publish on our open YouTube channel. So here's an example of ETM Talks with James from Energy Impact Partners, which is one of my favorite interviews. So yeah, and I also just want to briefly mention our Global Student Network, which is a recent new kind of addition to what ETM does. Basically, we're trying to put students in the energy sector, interested in the energy sector, in touch with learning opportunities, internship opportunities, and just getting them more in touch with what's happening in energy. So if you're either a student who wants to find out how to enter the energy industry and get help with that, or if you're a professional looking for ambitious students in the energy sector, please do reach out to us as well. And yeah, follow us if you're not already doing so. And here's the team. So we're based basically in Tokyo, also in Amsterdam, and in Vienna. Without further ado, I'm excited to present to you the main topic of today, which is reaching net zero in the Japanese energy sector. As you all know, there's a lot of talks about 2050 goals to have net zero emissions in Japan, as well as other surrounding countries like Korea. But when we really dig down into this, we want to understand how can we make the Japanese energy sector more sustainable in a way that is both technically possible, but also economically feasible. And what kind of policies do we need to do this, and how will this impact industry? So that's why I'm excited to hand it over to our three amazing speakers for today, which have all of these perspectives in mind in the discussion of how to reach net zero. So I would like to invite Roman to share his slides. So Roman Zisler joined the Renewable Energy Institute in 2014, where his research focuses on decarbonization processes around the world, especially focused on power systems or electricity. Romain is also a PhD student at the Tokyo Institute of Technology, and particularly interested in energy statistics. So now I'm excited to invite him to give an overview of carbon neutrality in Japan from his perspective. Romain, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and thank you much for the kind introduction. And also, thank you very much to the organizers of this event, the Energy Tech Meetup event. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to make a presentation tonight and share my views on how Japan can reach carbon neutrality by 2050. Before starting, I would just like to briefly present the Renewable Energy Institute. Some of you in Japan may know it as Shizen Energy Zaidan. The Renewable Energy Institute is a think tank. It's been established after Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident, and the founder is Masayoshi Son, who is the chairman and CEO of the SoftBank Group. At Renewable Energy Institute, we promote renewable energy and energy efficiency as the main solutions against climate change. And how we do that? By contributing to the energy debate through research publications and organization of events. Also, we are quite trying hard to develop and facilitate the exchange of knowledge by building a network of stakeholders, either in Japan, but also overseas. Now, this is what I want to focus in the next 10 minutes. Renewable Pathways to Climate Neutral Japan. This is one of the latest publications of the Institute. It's a collaborative work with Lahti University of Technology, Agraenergivende, and Renewable Energy Institute. And in this report, we have tried as hard as we could to figure out how Japan can reach carbon neutrality by 2050, centered on renewable energy, but also considering the cost aspect. After the event tonight, if you would like to, you can access our report. It's available for free at the URL indicated here. Okay, Japan going carbon neutral. This is not part of the report, but I think it's very important to kickstart the discussion tonight. Carbon neutrality is not reaching zero emissions. It's not having exactly zero emissions, but it's having a balance between what is emitted and what can be absorbed by ecosystems. So among the ecosystems or the sinks, you will have what the acronym here, LULUCF, stands for land use, change, and forestry. On the other hand, there are all the sources of emissions. This includes, for example, fuel combustion, and in the majority of which in Japan is electricity generation, road transportation, and also industrial emissions, such as those from the iron and steel industry or the chemical industry. Then you would have industrial process and product use, and that's rather the cement industry in majority in Japan. And the rest is waste, other is fugitive emissions, indirect emissions, and agriculture. So this chart presents the situation as of 2019. So we are in 2021 now, but let's say roughly it's half-time between 1990 and 2050. In this, let's say, first half, in the first 30 years, what has been achieved is the 5% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in Japan from the sources of emissions. But if we look at 2050 now, which is the deadline for carbon neutrality, and if we assume that the carbon sinks will not increase and not decrease, so just remain the same. Then what it means is that we need to decrease the emissions from sources by 95%. So that's a very, very strong acceleration that is required to reach carbon neutrality in Japan. And that's why I call it the great challenge. So here are the 5 key messages of the report. I go straight to the goal. The first message is that carbon neutrality can be achieved in Japan at reasonable costs based on renewable energy deployments and electrification. For this to happen, we recommend that a new target of at least 40% renewable energy electricity is set by 2030, and that all power is generated by renewable energy in 2050. Electrification of heat, transport, and industry will be very important, as well as various flexibility options, among which, for example, grid reinforcement, storage, be it battery or hydrogen, and demand-side flexibility. These are all options that need to be pursued. To achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, our second message is that a 3-step roadmap may be established. First, these roadmaps indicate that emission reduction should be 45% by 2030. That's relative to 2010. Then, at least 90% emission by 2045. And finally, residual emissions needs to be eliminated by 2050, or most of it. Third key point is that hydrogen will be used sparingly. We have found that in our counter simulation, direct electrification is more efficient and less expensive. However, this does not mean that, as I will show in the next slide, the next slide, that hydrogen will not be important. It will be very important to decarbonize Japan. The fourth point is that we believe nuclear power is not necessary to achieve carbon neutrality at lower costs. And this is based on on the empirical observations that we could see in the past 5 or 10 years, with power companies investing significant amount of money to restart nuclear power reactors. And doing so, they can restart sometimes, but when they do it at a quite uncompetitive cost. And our fifth message is that enhanced climate action is required immediately. There is absolutely no time to waste. So we strongly encourage the Japanese government to revise its interim targets for greenhouse gas emission as soon as possible. And from now, we'll just share a few illustrations from the study. As you can see today, most of the energy consumption in Japan is coming from fossil fuels, which are coal, oil, and gas. If we want to get to carbon neutrality, it's almost a phase of that is needed. On the one hand, what can be done is decrease the energy consumption, and this will happen because Japanese population is decreasing. On the other hand, there is still room for energy efficiency gains. On the other hand, renewable energy will play a central role, either for direct electricity usages or for the production of domestic e-fuels, such as hydrogen. Also, what will be very important are the e-fuel imports. So again, that can be envisioned to be hydrogen from Australia, where the potential of renewable energy is significant. Power imports may also play a role. And I said electrification is important. On this slide, you can see that we estimate electricity consumption to increase in transport, in buildings, and industry, but also especially for electrolysis, so to produce hydrogen. And this is how we plan, or how we envision the change in terms of electricity, both installed capacity and electricity generation. Left chart is the electrical installed capacity, and right side is the electricity generation. And you can see that we envision the very large part of renewable energy electricity to come from both solar PV and wind. And for solar PV, both utility scale and distributed are necessary. As for wind, both onshore wind and offshore wind are necessary. And this will almost conclude my presentation. In this slide, I have said all in the presentation, I have said there are 3 steps. The first steps towards carbon neutrality is between 2018 and 2030. In these 10 years that we are living now, energy conversion has to deliver emission reduction. And this will be what we mean by energy conversion is the decarbonization of the power sector especially. Also, we recognize that the transport sector can be decarbonized with electrification, like electric vehicles, for example. In the buildings, also, we think that energy efficiency can deliver greenhouse gas emission reduction. Then in the second stage, that is between 2030 and 2045, energy conversion will keep going on, so will decarbonization of the transport sector. But what will be very important in this second stage is the decarbonization of the industry. And for that, electrification and hydrogen needs to be introduced. And finally, in the last stage, we believe that the remaining challenge will be somehow to abate emission in the industry sector. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention. I welcome any questions that you may have. I hope I'm able to answer it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alain. I really liked your choice of wording for immediate action, because 2050 is a long time away, and by then, if we don't act before then, everything will be in a pretty bad shape already. So thank you very much for that. And I'd like to invite everyone to keep writing their questions in the Q&A chat. We'll keep all the questions for the end for now, but the speakers may be able to answer questions by typing throughout the talks as well. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Alain to share his slides. Alain has also been a speaker previously for Tech Meetup, so I'm excited we can do this collaboration as well. So Alain Darty is currently the representative director and COO of Energy Pool in Japan. And Energy Pool is a French company offering demand response and virtual power plant and smart grid services. He's also an executive committee member of the INSEAD Alumni Association in Japan and serves as a foreign trade advisor to French authorities in Japan, especially related to climate change and sustainability. So Alain, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. So as you said, I'm working for Energy Pool, and right now I'm at our operating center. So you can see the screens behind us. So basically we are managing demand response, which means we don't manage generation of electricity, we manage the demand side. So we try to shape the consumption of the main end user and factories especially. So behind me you have screens with, over there you have TEPCO, here you have Kansai, Chubu, sorry, and over there you have Kansai. So all the main areas of Japan where you have huge industrial consumption, we are managing customers over there. And if you have nobody behind me, it's because they are all teleworking today. I'm the only guy at the office. Okay. So now I will share with you the presentation to explain to you a little more about what we are doing here. So Energy Pool, so we are a French company. That you can see from the clocks behind me, one is Japan time, one is in French time. French time is not it's not a random choice. We are a French company with a subsidiary here in Japan. We were created in 2009 in France. And you can see on the slide that our company is not in Paris like many companies in France, but we are based in the French Alps, a very nice place, a very nice landscape, as you can see. And this headquarters is in a place called Savoie Technolac, which is a French cluster, like it's written, where you have a lot of companies specialized in energy transition related technology. You have PV, hydro, hydrogen, and of course, Earth demand response. In 2010, we set up a partnership with a big French company called Schneider Electric. I guess many of you know about them. In 2014, we came to Japan to participate in a proof of concept from METI. And then we started growing the business in Japan from then. And you have a picture of our operating center from another angle on this slide. And we have 90 staff worldwide, but just 15 in Japan. So now, what is demand response? I will show you concrete example of what we do and when it is needed, especially to help the energy market. So I think at least the audience, most of the audience is based in Japan. So you might remember that this winter there were a huge snowfall. We had a big cold wave, and from January 5th to January 15th, especially, the Japan grid was under huge tension in balancing demand and supply. So of course there is a nice picture showing you on Japan seaside there was a lot of snow and a lot of vehicles stranded. But most importantly, you can see on the right hand side of this slide, we had a very tight balance between supply and demand. And all the percentage you can see is how much demand was representing from the available generation capacity. So we were very close. When you are very close to 100%, you are close to a blackout, basically. So you can see all over Japan, except Okinawa, which was, of course, much warmer. We were at 96, 97. It was very, very tough time. So what happened is that since on top of that, we had really low power plant availability. And why? Because we had low LNG supply. So it's nice to have gas plant, but when you don't have the gas and the LNG to have them burn the gas and produce electricity, you have an issue. And that's what happened. So as a result, the prices of the JPEX shot up. It was the first time that it was so high. It went over 200 yen per kilowatt hour. And you can see on the right-hand side, the average. So historically, the average daily price was about 10. Sometimes it peaked at over 20 yen, but now we were at 90 for a day. So it was completely unprecedented tension on the Japanese market. And if you wonder what is a nice picture on the upper left hand of this slide, so you can see all the little red and green little dots. It's ships at the Panama Straits. So what happened is that there was a glut at the Panama Straits and a lot of LNG ships. It was one of the reasons why the market shot up. They couldn't go through, and there was a huge tension, not just on the Japanese market, but it also impacted Korea, for example. And as a result, of course, we were asked, please, in Kansai, in TEPCO, several times, please lower the demand of the customers because or else we will have a really hard time to balance supply and demand. So we had it 8 days in a row, for example, in the TEPCO area. We had a lot of them in December in Kansai and again in Kansai on January 8th. So it was a period of huge tension. And why demand response, I think, is very important. I will develop a little more about that. Is that we used to say, okay, if you have demand and supply issues, just produce more electricity, just burn more coal, burn more gas. But little by little, we start understand, and the contribution to demand response is growing, that we can also act on the demand side, on the consumer side. So of course, industrial, but you could also contribute, and people were asked, residential customers, to lower the demand, especially in the evening. So I will show you one more example of when demand response can be useful. So also, those who were based in Japan and especially in the Tokyo area in September 2019 might remember this huge typhoon that hit us. And the typhoon put about 1 million houses out of electricity. So it was really a big impact typhoon, and it hit especially the Chiba region, Minami-Boso. And when that happened, of course, you could say, okay, demand went lower, so we didn't need to lower demand. But actually what happened is that a lot of big generation units were also offline. So the tension was very high. And you can see on this slide also that, for example, on September 10, when this typhoon number 15 Fasai hit, the balance between supply and demand was at 97%. That's what you have in the upper lower hand. And the right-hand side, you can see the generation available, and it's always the same in the evening. Of course, solar PV generation starts going up, down, but the people still need a lot of electricity, so the tension is really high. So we had a demand response event that you can see in the lower hand of this slide in the evening. So you can contribute with demand response in many ways to the stability of the grid. So I will show you what we can do more than demand response, because of course, Energy Pool, we are not just doing demand response when we are asked to do it. You can do smart demand and smart consumption in many ways. So I will not go into details of this slide, but on the left-hand side, you have some modeling of the behavior of a cold storage consumer, and we see from the blue curve is what you can do when you are doing a model by a very smart engineer, and compared to the orange, which is the real temperature, and then in the green are neural network results. So you can see the neural network with AI, with iterating with algorithm, is much higher in accuracy. So it's a very powerful tool that you can use to shape your consumption, and that you have on the right-hand side, to be more efficient and to use electricity in a smarter way. You use less, and you use it when it's less expensive. So thanks to that, you can have up to 15% savings on electricity when you're a consumer. So it's a very powerful tool. And regarding forecast, now you can, if you use forecast of electricity in many ways, you can also be more proactive in the way you use electricity, not just passive and waiting for the grid to tell you to lower electricity demand. So here you have forecast of consumption of electricity using a random forest prediction, which is a classic algorithm of AI. That's one thing you need. The second thing you need to do forecast and to know when you have to shape your demand is to know when you will have generation available. So this is one of our tool, which is a very basic tool. It's just solar PV forecast. It's not very difficult. So this is the second pillar. And the third pillar that you need after consumption is what you have on the left, solar spot price forecast. So when you have solar PV forecast, consumption forecast, and solar price forecast, spot price forecast, you can shape your demand in a very smart way, your consumption. So for example, what you have here is what we call a virtual battery in action. We use a consumer, an industrial customer, and we told him, now there is too much solar PV. We know people will not consume much, and so the price will be cheap. That's the right moment to consume more. So this customer say, okay, I will consume more, and it happened many times this month, beginning of April. We did it, so it's not just a slide. It's actual operations, and then they consume more. And when I say virtual battery, it's very basic. Instead of storing electricity, you just store production. You know, they overproduced and they store the production, saying we will get the cheap electricity. It will lower our OPEX, and we use smarter consumption to absorb more solar electricity, which is a win-win kind of a result. So at the conclusion, what I want to convey is that there are many ways to address many huge issues that we have. You can have too much sun regarding to demand, so you can curtail, build batteries. You can have very cold, hot weather and a demand peak, and then you can start what we call super peaker, which are super high cost and very high emission power plants. Or you can, you also obviously have climate change and the trend toward higher temperatures, and you say, oh, I will get more and more demand because it will get hotter and hotter for air conditioning. I need to reinforce the grid, or I need to build more lines. Or you can simply put some simple demand response device, use software, and manage the demand in a smart way. And why demand response I think is interesting, and I think it's key to achieve this net carbon in 2050, because you can always, of course, produce more, develop new technologies, and new technologies are great. Of course, you could see the drone flying on Mars yesterday. It was a fantastic time, but it's not enough. You must also innovate in the way companies and us individuals, we consume and the way we behave. And I think that was the main message I wanted to convey. Of course, at Energy Pool, we do it through demand response and through industrial customers, but there are many ways to address this challenge through the consumer side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alain. Yeah, we all definitely felt those increased power bills this winter.
But you know, we were lucky because we didn't have a cut like happened in Texas. Texas had a quite similar problem, but they had a cut sometimes for 5 days for people, and in Japan we managed to balance it. So it went better.
Yeah, that was really crazy. So it just kind of, all of these new events happening in 2021 are really pointing the direction, hopefully, for what we need to do to make the grid more resilient. So thank you for that. And yeah, and I just want to emphasize again, if you guys have any questions or even clarification questions about words or anything, please do put it in the Q&A chat. I'm also tracking some questions that you guys have asked already that we can bring up at the end in the Q&A discussion as well, if they're not already answered by the panelists. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Virginie. Virginie Kawali is currently the CEO of Air Liquide in Japan, which is Air Liquide is a French company in gas and tech for industry and health. Virginie arrived in Japan in 2019 after several positions abroad. And in her last position, she was a CEO in Southeast Asian countries as well. So she has a very international experience. And like Alan, she also serves as a foreign trade advisor to French authorities in Japan. Virginie, the floor is yours. Can you share your screen?
Yeah, indeed, my topic is about how hydrogen can contribute to the energy transition in Japan. So let me first explain to you why hydrogen is an unavoidable solution and one of the best solutions we have today. So I have a graph showing you that we are seeing around the world a deep increase of CO2 emission. And if we continue like that, we will never be able to reach the Paris commitment. And if you don't know, CO2 molecule can stay in the atmosphere between 300 and 1,000 years. So it's not something that disappears quite quickly. So to halt climate change, it's absolutely mandatory, as we all know, to reduce the CO2 emission, and a computation has been done. We need to emit no more than 15 gigatons per year of CO2, knowing that the rest could be absorbed by other technology. And today we are emitting 50. So there are 4 levers which have been identified to reduce CO2 emission. The first one is what Alain explained to you, is energy efficiency. So basically, the best reduction you have is the one that you don't produce. And second, the second logical solution, thank you, Alain, is to make use of the CO2 to capture or to make use of the CO2 you emit. And you may not know, but it's already done. And all the CO2 is being used, and for example, in all your soda, and the Coca-Cola that you are drinking is made out of CO2 that is being captured. The third option is, of course, to reduce the oil of fuel, which is the main contributor to and do electricity. So big electrification, and of course the fourth option is to replace oil by renewable energy, like what is being done in Germany or in UK, where renewable is 40% of the energy matrix. So everybody has heard about hydrogen. We know it's the lightest molecule in the Earth. It's the most abundant element. But what is very important is, as a matter of fact, is the true enabler of an integrated electricity system with renewable. Next, please. So seven use of hydrogen have been identified. On the left side, you can see it's how it can enable the renewable energy system. We all know that renewable energy is intermittent. So when there is excess renewable energy, a good solution is to use this renewable energy, run an electrolyzer, transform it into hydrogen that you can store, ship everywhere, and that enables you to distribute this energy across the sectors and the region. And of course, it improves the resilience of the whole system. So this is the kind of the piece of the puzzle that was missing for years. And the second big use of hydrogen is, of course, the decarbonization. It can help decarbonize transport, it can help decarbonize the industry use, and it can help decarbonize heating by mixing hydrogen in natural gas, or even replacing hydrogen in for the heating. And of course, it can be used as a feedstock for the different energies. So next, please. So the use of hydrogen in the energy mix has been calculated. It was computed by the Hydrogen Council under the study done by McKinsey, and by 2050, which is indeed a long time ahead, 18% of the final energy could be done by hydrogen. And with this, provided it's clean, 6 gigaton out of the 50, you remember, could be reduced. And of course, it's a big market. 2.5 billion, 2,500 billion of sales, and at stake a lot of job creation. Next. So many countries have understood that, and there is not a single week without news, with 20 countries representing almost 70% of the GDP who have committed resources, both for electrolysis and as well for renewable. So it's really at the heart of many national climate plans. But how about Japan? As Romain said, next, Japan is the 5th largest emitting country in the world. It emits 1.2 billion of CO2 per year. And of course, it's heavily relying on the burning natural gas and coal to generate electricity. And after Fukushima, we all know that all the nuclear plants went down. So the dependence on fossil fuel is huge. And even though there has been some effort done to decrease the CO2, it's very marginal. And the Minister of Environment, Koizumi-san, has clearly said that there is a need for leapfrog, massive change in the energy matrix. So next, please. So in order to do that, the government has created priorities for the green growth sector, identifying 3 types of actions: energy, transport, manufacturing, and home office. And as you can see, for the hydrogen part, there is a mention of offshore, fuel as ammonia, hydrogen, and to some extent, nuclear power. So this is very tentative at this stage. We are still waiting for a lot of data, a lot of specificities, and we are waiting for the basic energy law, which is supposed to be launched, to be revised toward the end of the year. And what is very important for us is to get the confirmation of the CO2 emission reduction goal for 2030, and as well as for the target energy mix. So next, please. To be carbon neutral, the Japanese government is splitting like power and non-power. So you can see on the right-hand side, so that to reduce carbon emission, first, there is a big need of a big demand of a big increase of electricity. The electrification is going to help, and the electricity demand is expected to increase between 30 and 50%. There is, as you can see, in the non-power sector, hydrogen, methanation, thin fuel, and biomass will have a room. And of course, this will have to be accompanied by the carbon sequestration and the reutilization of carbon. As for the power sector, to reach carbon neutrality, the renewable share should be between 50 and 60%, and hydrogen is representing an ammonia around 10%. And this means about 20 million tons of hydrogen needs in 2050. Next, please. So what is the reality of hydrogen development today in APAC? So APAC, as a matter of fact, is leading the way in using hydrogen for mobility. There's been for a long time some altogether in 2021, for example, between China, Korea, Japan, and Australia, there will be $2 billion of public support. Toyota and Hyundai are the two clear #1 automotive makers, and they are going to mass production for fuel cell vehicles. And of course, in China, there is a tsunami coming of OEMs, and they are quite hungry, I would say. Hydrogen is attracting a lot of new players. In the past, we were kind of alone, or we were with other industrial gas companies, but now we see a lot of energy players. Kogas, Sinopec, Eneos, Woodside, they are all big energy players in their countries, their respective countries. And we see hydrogen refilling station infrastructure projects going on everywhere. And you can see below the number of fuel cell vehicles has increased, doubled altogether in 2020. And hydrogen refilling station as well is almost 500 stations. And in Japan, please, next. In Japan, Japan was early comer in the hydrogen mobility market. Japan started almost 10 years ago and designed this hydrogen mobility roadmap a long time ago. So altogether, $800 million have already been allocated by METI, NEDO, and so on. Oops. Before next, earlier, please. And we have the cars and a special organization for the hydrogen refilling stations called GI. What is still missing in Japan is a big network of bus and trucks, and we are pushing for that. So if you, next please, if you look at the 7 use of hydrogen in Japan, what we are seeing is import, as Romain was saying, a lot of projects related to imports of hydrogen from Australia, from Middle East, even from Russia, with either blue or green hydrogen. We saw as well a big push for mobility. We see as well studies on the use of hydrogen for steel. So there are a lot of Nippon Steel, for example, is making some survey on that. And we see as well some studies on use of hydrogen in co-firing for thermal plants and induction in the natural gas. And we are seeing as well some projects with carbon sequestration. It's still at the early stage though. So now that next we are entering in a new wave of hydrogen development. What are the next steps? So 2015 to 2020, it was mostly initiation with the mobility. The next 5 years and maybe longer is scale. What is absolutely needed to get a competitive hydrogen is scale. And we need to think big. So this is the major challenge. And to think big, you need to have the demand. And today it's kind of catch-22 because you don't have the demand, so you don't have the big project. So there must be, and this will be one of my last comments, there must be an incentive for all the players to think big so that they can develop the technology blocks. So the liquefaction capabilities, even the transportation of liquid, industrialized refilling stations, and of course, heavy-duty vehicles or buses. And then we can talk about a sustainable business with a global supply chain. Next. So here, Air Liquide is developing all those technology blocks. So this is a roadmap. This is a map of the world. So we are developing hydrogen liquefaction capabilities with projects in the US. We have as well developed electrolyzer electrolysis capabilities with several players, and we have as well developed a lot of the hydrogen refilling stations in both in all continents. And next, this is something that we have been doing for a long time. So what is really needed? So beside the scale and the technology blocks, what we need from especially the Japanese government is to give us some visibility and some framework. So we are still expecting what could be the national and regional strategies. We are still waiting for systemic approach between balance and demand. We are still waiting for a framework for incentive. Will there be subsidies? Will there be carbon tax? This is an unavoidable enabler for large-scale projects. And then it is coming back to one of the questions. We need a low price of renewable energy. And today the renewable energy in Japan is extremely expensive. You can have a renewable energy in Chile for 2 cents per kilowatt, and here in Japan is 13 cents. And we know that this is the key factor to have the green energy. So and there are a lot of barriers in the Japanese market. And the last topic is that we need this predictability with a regulatory framework, but at the same time, we need deregulation, because in Japan, there is a lot of regulations, which is costing us a fortune to operate and to invest. The cost of a hydrogen refilling station in Japan is 2 times the cost of a hydrogen refilling station everywhere in the world, because of regulations that were created when the technology were not that sophisticated. But all this being said, next we are very confident that the next decade is the decade of hydrogen, and that it's a one lifetime opportunity to really develop new technology, new market, and a sustainable environment that we can leave a cleaner earth to our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Virginie. And thank you so much, everyone else, for also sharing your questions in the Q&A. I think our panelists have already gotten to some of them. And in the 10 minutes we have left, I'd like to start with some of the questions from the audience. We've gotten a lot of questions about hydrogen. So Virginie, I think I want to keep you on the podium, because this is a very hot topic now, with a lot of interest, especially in Japan, from the government. And I think we've gotten a lot of questions about kind of economic feasibility and profitability, for example, from Jennifer, Kitajima-san, Alessandro. So they're asking basically, what is the potential production of kind of hydrogen from renewables in Japan, and how is this economically possible? Like, for example, how is your company's, Alessandro asked, how is your hydrogen path to profitability? Basically, how is this economically feasible?
Well, it's the question. How we can make hydrogen cost competitive so that it can really replace it can replace fuel. So today we are not yet there, of course. There is a big gap, and as I said, we need scale. But if you to have some numbers in mind, in order for hydrogen to be competitive, it needs to be between $3 to $7 per kilo, and today we are at least 2 times this. So the different blocks needs to be worked. So you have, of course, the renewable energy. Some countries are already reaching a very competitive renewable energy. We know it's working in Australia, it's working in Chile. So the renewable energy is possible, not in Japan today, but it's possible elsewhere. Then we need to work on the liquefaction, the electrolyzer. And today there are 2 technologies that are being developed. You have PEM, or alkaline, and of course this is being improved all the time. It's not yet at the maximum, the lowest possible cost. You have the liquefaction capability. Today, we are talking about 30 tons per day liquid capability, but we know that very soon it's going to be too small. So all the players need to work on that. And of course, if you import hydrogen in Japan, you have to work on the ships. And today there is only one carrier who can do that. It's the pilot of KHI. So so there is a lot of blocks to work on. The hope is that it's a worldwide topic. So you have a lot of players working on that. Everybody has understood that hydrogen is absolutely fundamental in the energy transition. So I'm confident we will get to the target price. And to quote a study that is done by Bloomberg, they said, well, hydrogen may not be the best solution, but today it's the only one we have, so we have to make it happen. Long answer. Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And you also mentioned in your presentation that hydrogen needs incentives in Japan. So I don't know if, Roman, do you have any thoughts or ideas on things like subsidies and carbon tax and how this might support hydrogen in Japan, or just any thoughts on the hydrogen incentive discussion?
Well, what definitely would support hydrogen in Japan is cheap renewable energy electricity. We're very far from that. Virginie mentioned it. Well, basically, conditions are roughly the same in Europe and Japan, but price of renewable energy is double or triple the price than in Europe. That's a big issue. So definitely there needs to be policies that deliver cost-competitive renewable energy. Then there will be a lot of work to develop the hydrogen infrastructure as well. And I think this Virginie can say better than me, but I see these two issues being very important.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Japan always has this discussion of renewables being expensive, even though they're pretty cheap in other parts of the world. So we got this question from Peter, which I found interesting, is maybe relevant to this discussion as well, is what are the characteristics of the Japanese energy market that are notably specific to Japan compared with other developed markets? And like how might this this is my follow-up question, and how might this be impacting how renewables are economically feasible or not feasible in the country as well? Maybe Alan, would you like to start?
Okay, so we start on this one. So regarding the Japan specificity, there is one, of course, obvious specificity is just Japan is an island with no interconnection with neighboring countries. And it has an impact on prices of renewables and of energy, because you cannot count on your neighbor to absorb your over generation, or when your renewables are under generating, you cannot count him on maybe having high wind like in the North Sea in Germany. So of course it has an impact on the price of energy. And first, because you cannot balance with neighboring countries. And also it means you have to rely on yourself. So you might have to overbuild to achieve balance and energy security. So that's one of the specifics of Japan. And one thing more is that Japan is split, it's a little technical, it's split between 50 hertz and 60 hertz areas, which makes balancing even more difficult. So that's one of the many reasons why energy is expensive today in Japan.
And I would add that on top of that, there is no separation between production and distribution. So today, so it's only one player, and this is a drawback, I would say, an obstacle for more competition. And then the connection to the grid, even for small renewable players, is extremely expensive. So even if they are producing at a cheaper cost, it's the connection to the grid is a barrier.
Thank you. Roman, would you like to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I think the feed-in tariff is an example of possibly counterproductive energy policies. I mean, on the one hand, it has been extremely successful in allowing the deployment of solar PV at a high cost. And a lot of projects have just been waiting, for the cost of solar PV to decrease before making their installation. And well, I would say the renewable energy industry has not been pushed to deliver cost-competitive projects. So that's another issue. In Europe, sometimes projects are vying for volumes through auctions. And in Europe, and not only in Europe, in many places around the world, it has been quite helpful to decrease cost of projects. Here in Japan, with developers having already their projects on feed-in tariff, they have been more reluctant to try to make a project that would have lower returns. But well, now the pipeline of feed-in tariff projects is drawing up, and maybe for those who are interested in developing new projects, if they have to fight through auctions, then they will have incentive to cut costs, and I think that will be very helpful. Now, I think touching upon what Virginie said about competition, I think the Japanese power market is overall not competitive, and there's the power companies which have a lot of power. They have their own vested interest. They are not trying to make life easier for new entrants, which is understandable. But well, maybe also on the regulatory side, trying to have a more level playing field, that would help, definitely.
Thank you. And I'm very sorry, everyone. We're running out of time, so I think we're going to have time for one more question. And I think it would be good to end on a next steps note, you know, to give people some hope. What's next? We got a question from Nobuki-san on, are there any kind of breakthroughs in how the government is, you know, changing deregulation or changing policy? And this is also kind of related to my final question as well, which is, you know, what is the next step now, like that's needed, a very concrete step in order to support reaching net zero by 2050, or just to get us on the right path? What kind of change do we need now, whether it's the government doing something or businesses doing something differently? Just final thoughts on that. That can give our audience some key takeaway from this panel. I think, Alain, would you like to start?
Okay, I'll start. So I think, of course, I'm demand oriented. So I would say the one very big, and it's happening actually. One change we need is to get more and more from distributed part of the grid, and which means distributed energy. So it could be small solar panels everywhere. It could be small wind turbines, small batteries. It could be leveraging the batteries of electric vehicles. You need to leverage all the potential that is already there and growing. If you manage to manage this with a cloud-based solution and with some AI, you could, liberate or free up a huge potential without building more, actually. So I think that's really key. I think how to use better all the great technologies that we are currently developing is absolutely necessary for us to achieve this net zero in 2050. It's not just building more batteries or more hydrogen. Of course, it's needed, but for me, the most important is to build a smart way to leverage all those potential, and also to have the regulation. So you also need to have innovation in regulation to back this up.
Thank you. Yeah, to all of our data scientists listening, please make a change in the energy sector. And go talk to Alain if you'd like to figure out how to do that. Yeah, Roman, any final words on this?
Yes. Well, I think the top priority is to revise targets, interim targets in particular, both for greenhouse gas emission reduction, and then, well, in Japan there are targets only for the power sector. Maybe it's time to go a little beyond the power sector. Maybe set renewable energy targets also for transport, for heating and cooling, but doing it ambitiously, and also maybe try to, for the policymakers in Japan, to try to get the record straight on really what can make it happen. I think a more positive stance towards renewable energy is important. Maybe Virginie would say for hydrogen, or also more ambitious. I mean, Japan used to be ambitious, I would say, for hydrogen. It is not anymore compared to European standards. So there are really a lot of areas to cover, but I think deciding the direction to take and then pave the way.
Thank you. Yeah. Again, if there's any policymakers listening, please reach out to Roman as well. And I like that you mentioned that it's not only about electricity and solar, but also about heat, about transport, about gas, about basically everything we do takes energy. So thank you for pointing that out as well. And Virginie, final words?
Yeah, thank you. So what's next, I think, is to be ambitious and to have a comprehensive plan that includes both supply and demand. And supply, we discussed that, it's integrated with renewable energy, but the demand as well needs to be fine-tuned. And this is where the objectives are coming in, because the biggest polluter is the steel. Second is you have cement, and then you have a little bit of transportation. So what is expected from those industries? This is what is very important to understand. Because if you have a complete demand, then you can have a complete understanding of the demand. You can build projects. Otherwise, if you just look at only the mobility, the critical mass will not be there. So next step, I think, is to learn from the other geographies who have developed that. And I think Europe is quite advanced, and this could be a good dialogue to work with the European countries.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what ETM is about too, kind of sharing, learnings from different countries and different people. So thank you so much for that comment as well. And I'm sorry to everyone who didn't get their questions answered, but please feel free to reach out to the panelists after this if you'd like to get in touch, because networking is a big part of what we're trying to support as well. And let's keep the discussion going. And just that, I think that's my final words. Alain, do you have any final words?
No, thank you. Thank you, Amanda, for the co-organization, and thank you for all the participants for your active participation and the very numerous questions. Don't hesitate to reach out for further questions. And also thank you, Romain and Virginie, for joining us today. It was very much appreciated. Keep it Dutch.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.